Hello! In this second interpretation of tissue, we're going to look at the poem as a plea for Muslim culture to be accepted, and Muslim culture then comes to represent all cultures around the world that need to be accepted. And the context of this, of course, is Islamophobia, the way that in the Western world our newspapers frequently equate Islam with terrorism, and this makes life for a Muslim person living in any Western country very problematic. And the poem is trying to address this and change our views. In this reading, the paper that begins the poem becomes a metaphor for poetry itself and ideas that poetry can share and spread. And those ideas are reflected with this image of light shining through. That's a spiritual image here, religious language, it comes from the religious register. And the whole point of poetry, therefore, is to alter things. And what she wants to alter is our understanding of a Muslim culture. Here, she focuses on a respect for history, but also points out that this is a shared family history that we should identify with. So when we come to the well-used books, she's referring to the power of writing to change our minds. She wants to soften us up as readers to accept her message. And then she adds another book, the Quran, which, if you know anything about religion, has similar prophets to the Bible. They feature many of the same characters. Because she wants to show how we should all accept each other, these family histories are written by a hand. In other words, it could be anybody's hand. And then she gives this idea of names and histories and who was born to whom. And if you look at Genesis in the Bible, you've got the section called the begats, and so begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so. It's that very same list that we have in our Western Christian culture that's the same in the Muslim culture being referenced here. In other words, she's suggesting that our histories are intertwined. And because she's focusing on the family history, she takes us away from that kind of history of war and battle, the Christian Crusades, Islamic Jihad. She completely ignores that and says the real history is what matters, that we all are part of the same family. We are connected in every single possible way. Next, I come to this troubling metaphor here, if buildings were paper. And this appears to be an allusion to the Twin Towers being destroyed on 9/11. See how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. This metaphor implies something slightly dangerous here, that the destruction of the Twin Towers is somehow a small event. It's just a sigh. It's just a shift in the wind. But it also suggests that in the magnitude of what happens in the world, it isn't a tremendous loss. And when you think about the reaction of America and then invading Iraq, and the hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed after that, you can see that its effect is just like the wind. It wasn't a particularly significant event in itself. And indeed, if you look back through history at the conflict between, any countries, but if you think about the Crusades, they were all-encompassing at one time, and are now not so, or haven't been so for a long time. History is like the wind. It changes all the time. But what is permanent are people and beliefs and families. If we look at terrorism this way, then we see it as the act of a few fanatics, perhaps even a few thousand of them, but nevertheless not representative of a whole people. And we should keep in mind what we have in common, one people with another. This stanza is particularly relevant, and it's all there to suggest that we ought to look beyond our borders, which are artificial constructions, and see the real humanity beyond. So maps are highlighted as a human construct, an artificial way of designing countries. And then the sun represents, if you like, her vision of what we should be like. And we should shine through our borders, just like the sun does, not see borders, not see difference, not see opposition. And if we use this metaphor of the map, she's saying that these are just marks on a page. You know, they're not real things. They're constructions, constructs in our own mind. And the other thing she does is she uses the alliteration here of rivers, roads, and rail tracks to show that these natural features that seem to divide us are the same as the roads and the rail tracks that we've constructed to divide us. In other words, those real divisions are man-made. They're not inevitable. They can be changed. And this interesting word that she's made up here, mountain folds, by joining two words together, suggests how something that seems permanent, like the mountain, can simply fold and collapse. And that's what she says in this poem should happen to our prejudice. Once we stop looking at these differences between us, we'll find that everything folds away and we see that we are the same. Those obstacles, like giant mountains, don't really exist. Perhaps to emphasize our similarity, she also employs a lot of internal rhyme and half rhyme here. Shines and lines, roads and folds is a half rhyme, in order to suggest our similarity, each person with the other, to emphasize how we're not really divided by our differences. In this stanza, Dharker uses a lot of religious imagery to ask this question: can our religious destiny be written anew? In other words, the opposition between Muslim and Christian, can it be changed? Can we be one people? So her reference to an architect obviously is an extended metaphor to the builder, but also refers to God. So we could make not Allah and not God, but an architect. Are they both in effect the same architect if we looked at them differently? She emphasizes the common bond between the two religions with this reference to the luminous script. So early editions of the Quran and the Bible are filled with illuminated writing, where in the Christian tradition monks have copied the books and drawn beautiful paintings described, if you like, as luminous, illuminated, full of light. Again, that positive image of light that comes throughout this poem. And the idea of the script isn't just handwriting. It also introduces the idea of destiny and control. So is this script already written down and the opposition between Muslim and Christian set, or is it a script that we can rewrite ourselves? Is it a play that is yet to be written? And obviously, as a poet, she hopes it can be written anew. And then this last line is calling for change, so that we would never wish again to build with brick. And the alliteration of build and brick emphasizes the division that this kind of building makes. And instead of the division, we would build upon each other, layer over layer. That, again, is a symbol of the generations, how generations work. One generation layered on top of the next, but also one people layered on top of the next, to show how we are so similar. The next stanza uses a the metaphor of daylight here to represent God. What if daylight could break through and get rid of our pride, so our sense that we are better than other people, and find a way to trace a grand design? So this metaphor, the grand design, obviously refers to an architect building a city or building buildings, but in terms of God, it references God's grand design, his plan for us. And so she's asking us a question, do you think, reader, that God's grand design is for us to be at war with each other, in enmity with each other, or do you think his purpose is to unite us? And by having that as the last line of the stanza, she's pointing us more towards that second answer, that we have to find a way to trace a grand design, a grand purpose, something that unifies us all. Next, she focuses on our common humanity, which unites us. So we are all made of the same living tissue. And this will be a structure that was never meant to last, but actually will. So although as each individual purpose, our lives are mortal and short, actually we can build something through our shared humanity that lasts for much longer. Our shared values and tolerance of each other can be passed on from generation to generation. And this metaphor of the paper being smoothed and stroked, looked after, is a metaphor for us looking after each other. And when we look after each other this way, we become transparent. So our nationality, our difference, our different religions don't matter. We just see through all that to the real person beneath. And then she ends the poem with this very tiny stanza, which breaks the quatrain structure, because she wants to show that we can break free of the structures that we see in the world. This is all about changing that structure. And that's also echoed here, that the reader has now turned into the same skin as Dharker's. In other words, we have become darker. A nice little pun there, I think, which may be intentional. If we stop looking at the colour of our skin, the differences in our religions, we'll see that we're actually the same. We can link this interpretation to the context of the poem. So Dharker is born in Pakistan, grew up in Scotland, moves between Scotland and India, works in both countries, and she is the epitome or the embodiment of someone who tears down borders and sees the whole world as one people. And she'll move from the Muslim world to the Christian or to the secular, and she tries to show how we are all identical. And the other thing that is really interesting is that Dharker also moves between mediums. So she's a film director, obviously a poet, and she's also a graphic artist. It seems as though in every choice in her life, she believes in breaking down barriers. And she's saying, actually, this kind of communication and creativity is the same, be it as a poet or a filmmaker or an artist. We're all trying to communicate truth. And that's what this poem is about. The truth is, we are all one body, one people, and we should embrace it. Okay, I hope that helped you understand the poem. And in my next video, I'll give you a new interpretation.